I'm Laura London, and these are the secrets of speaking of Jung. Returning to us today for an unscripted, uncensored, and unedited episode is Jungian psychoanalyst, author, and astrologer Sherene Vismaya at an undisclosed location in Sri Lanka. She holds a master's degree in clinical psychology from New York University and a master's degree in developmental psychology from Pace University. She completed her postgraduate work in psychoanalytic studies at the New School for Social Research in New York City and at the International School of Analytical Psychology, known as ISAP, in Zürich. Sherene has been working as a psychoanalyst, a practitioner of astrology, and an authentic movement facilitator for the past 27 years. She draws upon the teachings of Jungian psychology, somatic healing, and Eastern spirituality to help individuals connect with their authentic selves to achieve a greater sense of wholeness. She specializes in trauma, depression, addiction, creative blocks, and anxiety, and explores how astrology can be used as a tool for growth, self-discovery, and healing. Her yearly pilgrimages to India over the past 2 decades have greatly influenced her philosophy and her work. She attributes much of her metaphysical knowledge to her spiritual guru, Amma, and the insight of her late astrology mentor, Edwin Steinbrecher. She received her astrology certification in 2000 and continues to incorporate Dome's inner guide meditation technique, a process of integrating Jungian active imagination with astrology. In 2011, she founded Project 40, an online community devoted to Jungian alchemy and the path of individuation. Under the name Sherene Shostak, she has contributed chapters for the books Speculation Now and Transpersonal Astrology. And she is the co-author of Surviving Saturn's Return, Overcoming the Most Tumultuous Time of Your Life, The Fate of Your Date, Divination for Dating, Mating, and Relating, and Dog Stars, Astrology for Dog Lovers. Sherene has lectured and taught at conferences and institutes around the world on astrology, Jungian and archetypal psychology, dream analysis, and authentic movement. And she is widely regarded as one of the leading experts on Jungian astrology. Her work has been featured in various publications, including The Mountain Astrologer, Time Out New York, Psychology Today, and Teen Vogue. She has been featured on NBC's Astrology.com, BravoTV.com, The Fox Morning Show, Benjamin Moore's Horoscope Campaign, and from 2005 to 2020, she was the resident astrologer for Elle UK magazine. Sherene first appeared on Speaking of Jung in episode 58 at the very beginning of the pandemic in 2020 when she was in retreat at the Amritapuri ashram in Kerala, India. She returns to us today from an undisclosed location in Sri Lanka to discuss her current ongoing intensive P21 Secrets, a collaboration with Billy Corgan, which I am taking part in as well. Please consider helping Speaking of Jung stay on the air by contributing to our tip jar on Patreon for just $5 a month, or by making a one-time or recurring donation through PayPal. You can find the links in the description box below, or by visiting the support page on our website, speakingofjung.com. You can also help our YouTube channel grow by clicking the thumbs up on this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. It's free and it helps us grow. I am also here to remind you of the importance of recording your dreams. Temenos Dream is a revolutionary dream tracking app available for iOS and Android. Now you can record your dreams by speaking into your phone or typing them into the app. Search for myths, legends, and fairy tales related to the themes in your dreams. Use the new advanced AI interpretation with a focus on Jung's work, looking closely at symbols and associations to consider shadow, anima, animus, archetypes, and much more. You can help support Speaking of Jung simply by downloading the app and creating a free account. Unlimited use is available with a premium subscription. Click on the link in the description box below or on our website, speakingofjung.com, where you will find links to everything discussed in this episode in the show notes. This video interview is being recorded on Wednesday, February 21st, 2025, through the magic of StreamYard. Hi, Sherene.
Hi.
It's really great to see you. The first time we did an episode together, we were still audio only, and now we are doing video. And today, for the first time, I am in my home office with the city behind me. So we've got the moon. And tell us a little bit about where you are.
I'm in Galle, Sri Lanka. Oh, I'm disclosing the undisclosed location.
It's secrets, right? So we're disclosing secrets today.
That's the first secret, yes. It's a UNESCO heritage site. Oh my God, I can't speak. UNESCO
Heritage site, yeah.
And it's so incredibly relaxing, and it's really conducive for doing the inner work. And it has that lost in time feeling that I love so much. It's really amazing to be here.
So are you full-time at the ashram in Kerala now?
Pretty much. I have been since we spoke in 2020. I mean, I go back to the US a few months a year, but the majority of the time, yeah, I'm pretty much there.
So you were born here in the US and you went to school here. I think you did your undergraduate work in Michigan, right? And then you moved to New York City and did your graduate work. And did you spend time? How much time did you spend in Zurich?
Well, I would go there in the summers mostly. So in some falls, and even now I try to go back, at least once a year, to do, to connect with ISAP and to just I love Switzerland. I love to go and just connect to the land there. You really feel the sacredness and the power of that place for sure. It's a great place for retreats too. And I love the Jungian odysseys that ISAP does, or ISAP. I don't know how they actually pronounce it. ISAP.
Yeah. I say ISAP. Maybe they say ISAP.
Yeah, I've been saying ISAP, and then I was like, did I hear it? Because now they actually have a beautiful Instagram account, which is great. They're getting out there. They were also very secretive before. So now I'm hearing, because I've never actually heard people pronounce it, I've just seen it written, and I'm like, oh. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Instagram, and that is where, I don't know how you and I got connected on Instagram. We did our first episode together in 2020. And Sherene, do you remember that the pandemic started in the middle of March?
Yes.
And you and I recorded on April 1st.
Wow.
And you happened to be in India when the pandemic started, right? And then you decided to stay?
I do remember that.
Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was just thinking that when you were giving the intro, like, oh, I hope it's not a synchronicity, like this kind of full circle. I'm like, are we heading into another strange time? Because, yeah, I mean, I remember that it was such a fateful trip. It's like Gilligan's Island. Like suddenly I'm in, not leaving, Yeah, it really felt like that. I just landed and never left. And I mean, there was this window. I mean, I wasn't trapped. There was a window. I remember it distinctly when they said, okay, now we have a few of these, like, what I forgot what they called them, those kind of escape flights or whatever to get out.
Right.
And I had the option. I can't remember if it was in May or June they were doing those flights. And I remember I had to make the decision, like, do I want to go back to my old life or do I want to stay? And it was really clear to me that I wanted to stay. And that meant giving up everything I had to put. At that point, I put everything into a storage unit and gave up my beautiful apartment in San Francisco overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. It was like my dream apartment. And something in my soul just knew, like, just stay, don't go back, just stay put. And I'm so glad I did.
And I think you had said that Amma was encouraging people to stay, and we were in lockdown, and I remember hearing that it was 2 weeks. They wanted us to stay in for 2 weeks, and that was beginning in the middle of March. And then it lasted a year, about a year and a half. It was different
Yeah.
in different places, but so you were on retreat, and would you tell us a little bit about why you, as an American, as a psychologist, a Jungian analyst, why were you on retreat in India?
I mean, I had been going since my first Saturn return since 1997. I've basically been going to India every year for a month to 3 months, as part of my studies, I guess you could say. Like, it's just part of my path. So usually I would go in the winter around that time, stay as long as I could. It got easier, obviously, when we started to do things online, and I could see my
Right.
clients online. Before that, I could only go 3 weeks maximum a year when I had my practice in New York. So once we started doing, it used to be Skype sessions and then Zoom sessions. Then I started spending, a few months a year in India.
But you
And
were studying when you were there?
yeah, I mean, I call it studies. It's like my spiritual home. I mean, yeah, I am studying. I was studying Vedic astrology and Vedantic studies, and Vedic chanting, Sanskrit, yoga. Like, there's all, of course, but that's not the reason I'm there. I'm there because it's the Divine Mother. It's living with the Divine Mother. It's so healing in itself just to be on that sacred ground and to live near a Kali temple, So, but yeah, it just was a place for me to go and recharge, really. And I always had an inkling or a premonition that I would end up there later in life. I thought it was going to be much later. I always envisioned myself being there in my old age. I guess I'm kind of in my old age now. No, but I was thinking more like, retirement time.
Right.
So it was a little earlier, but it coincided with my Chiron return, and like right at that point. And it just was really clear. Like, I thought, I'm so happy here. Like, this is my home. Like, the world is like I want to visit the world. I want to be here and then visit the world.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in the world. It switched.
Yeah.
The whole thing switched. Although there, I brought the world with me there. So I'm still working there. And that's been my whole spiritual struggle, as you've been reading about in the P21, that's my tension of the opposites, like trying to find that balance between the part of me that had this whole life in New York City and San Francisco and was a very worldly person, traveling and doing all the things, to a part of me wants to just do that, chop wood, carry water, empty,
Yeah.
empty it all out. So that's been my East-West irreconcilable opposites journey.
Do you know much about Jung's visits to India?
That is such a good question. I was just thinking about that the other day. Like, there's so little that I have a feeling I had some books that probably had more writing on it that I've sadly lost when I lost my storage unit. I had such an amazing collection of books. I'm trying to like recreate it. It's very hard, like little by little over time, like with living in India, because I, in very Scorpio Pluto extremes, was like, I don't need any of that stuff. I'm giving up my storage unit. Like, what am I going to do with it?
Right.
I was paying for it for like a year, and then I said, you know what, just let it go.
Yeah.
And I did retrieve a few things through a friend, but I lost a good chunk of it, So yeah, but anyway, the point is, I think I probably had some books. I remember reading a few things. I've seen a few references, but does anyone know, is there like some hidden manuscript about that trip that he had to India? I mean, we hear definitely pieces of the stories, but I don't know where that's actually documented.
We do hear pieces in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and the book I love is C.G. Jung, Word and Image, where there are a lot of photos and some had been previously unpublished letters. And then in Deidre Baer's biography, which I hear so many rumors about truths, untruths in that book. But he was awarded or or honored with, they were honorary degrees from some universities. I have that all in the timeline on my website. There's a page on C.G. Jung on speakingofjung.com that outlines all that. But I'm interested in you and your studies and what led to you, which is the topic of this episode, creating what you call P40. And right now we are a week into kind of an abbreviated version of the P40. It's a P21, meaning it's a 21-day intensive.
Mm-hmm.
And the topic is secrets. And I've joined you on this, and every day we work on a different topic. So how did your time in India, and I also want to talk about astrology. So I'm saying that now toward the beginning of the episode. I want you to tell us all about how you practice astrology, because it's a little bit different, or a lot different, than Western astrology, which is what I was trained in. So I don't know really anything about, is it Jyotish?
Well, now I'm incorporating more of that, although that is such a vast study. So I think the best way to describe what I'm doing now, because I have the Western background for 20, however many years it is now.
Yeah.
That's also been part of this whole like bridging the East-West. So what I've done specifically is I bring in the Jyotish that I've studied and feel, confident about sharing, that I feel really aligns with the archetypal, which for me is working a lot with the nakshatras. The planets are, the base is very similar. It's just the interpretation in terms of the different zodiacs. One is sidereal, one is tropical. So what I do is I actually bridge it for people. So I give an interpretation less based in, how can I say this? It's like when you're integrating two different languages, basically. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to tell people, you just translate. So I'm translating, like I'm looking at it from both angles, and then I'm translating. So I'm just using what really solidifies, what overlaps, what confirms each other, what supports from both interpretations. I find that really fascinating. Mm-hmm. So then I do my best to just interpret it for people, so they're not like, wait, but I thought I was a Leo in this system and now I'm a Cancer, but if I give them just the breakdown of the translation through the nakshatras, for instance, it just deepens their understanding, even if they think, let's say they think they're Leo, but in Vedic, they're a Cancer ascendant. But when I describe what that specific Cancer ascendant is like through the Jyotish lens, it doesn't contradict. In fact, it just deepens their understanding, which is really beautiful. Mm-hmm. Just to give an example. But so I do use the archetypal still, and I do use Western planets. I use outer planets. Okay. So it's just I would say it's like a wider lens. It's not about, and that's been a big teaching. Like it's not either or. I really feel that those systems can give you such a depth of insight into the psyche.
Mm-hmm. And you incorporate Jungian psychology, and of course, well, for the listeners who are not familiar with Jung's connection to astrology, would you tell us a little bit about why astrology is relevant to Jungian psychology?
Sure. So it's very interesting, especially the deeper you go into understanding the archetypal frame of the planetary teachings and just the planets as gods, really, which is true in both systems. It gives a language for the symbolic that we wouldn't have otherwise, especially in terms of as above, so below. And I love hearing, even in those old interviews with Marie-Louise von Franz, for instance, like she talks about it so seamlessly. Like when she's talking about alchemy or dreams, she's like, oh, even if this person doesn't know about Saturn or Jupiter, back when she was doing dream interpretation, a lot of people didn't know anything about Saturn and Jupiter. Now we talk about it. It's, thanks to, Instagram and TikTok, most people know what a little bit about Saturn and Jupiter. But back then, dream interpretation, people were like, what's Saturn and Jupiter? Mm-hmm. So she was talking about, well, even if people don't know about it, you can look up what does it mean, what is it meant in mythic times, or what are the different connotations. And now, like you were, even this amazing app, that is doing the dream interpretation, I bet you it probably has astrological or planetary references through
Yes.
the mythic, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, what's so cool is that, now we know for a fact that Jung was very interested and influenced in integrating astrology into his work, which they kept hush hush, for a long time. And now it's, everyone is accepting, fascinated by it. And I mean, I can't imagine how he didn't, having such, like, knowing everything he knows, how could he have not encountered the language of astrology? And as you and I were just talking about the other day, through the P21, I especially love that book from his Analytical, Sabi Tower. So fascinating, like, because she really lays out how they worked with geomancy and how he would create what looks like the Vedic, what we call the North chart for Vedic astrology, the North Indian chart,
Okay.
which is like the diamond chart. There were all these depictions that looked like that chart that he would use for the houses and for the planets, and then they would lay the tarot spreads on the side and use different prompts. So it was like a multi-layered oracle that he was working with. And I wish, we could go back in time and see what he was actually doing with astrology. I know Liz Green, that's another book, which breaks my heart, I never got to read, that I bought right before the pandemic, all the I think she's got 2 volumes about Jung and astrology. So another thing I have to eventually try to get back into my library and read.
Yes, and I just want to interrupt you. There will be links to these books in the show notes for this episode. And the Sabi Tauber book that Sherene is referencing is titled Encounters, right? And I'm looking at doing an episode of Speaking of Jung with the editors, the Gerbers, and do you have it there?
It's part of, I would take it out, but
that's okay. I'll put a photo of the book cover. I'll insert it here in this episode, and I hope to be doing an interview with the editors. So yeah, so Jung did use astrology. He also mentions astrology a lot more in the letters, volumes 1 and 2, and not so much throughout the collected works. But his daughter Gret was an astrologer, a full-on astrologer.
Yep.
So
I think she would cast the charts for him, right? Like, he would give her the data from his clients, and then she would cast the chart.
She would cast the charts and didn't have all the software that we use these days, right? Right. So we jump around a lot on these episodes because we try to keep them within an hour, but I would like to ask you about the astrological configurations that are happening in the sky right now that you included in the description for this intensive that we're doing, which I still want you to describe to the listeners because you do these periodically. So right now we're doing P21 Secrets. It started on Valentine's Day and it ends on March 6th, and I'm sure you're going to be doing others. And it has, I've been through analysis. I've been through other things as well, training as an astrologer. I've done active imagination, meditation, Kundalini yoga. This is hitting me on a whole other level. It's opening things up for me that I haven't thought about, I haven't touched in years. And I want to thank you for that. And because I don't want to forget to mention this, so I think I was saying this in the beginning of the episode, you and I did our first interview together in 2020, and then at some point we became connected on Instagram, and you were in India, and you would post the most beautiful photos of cows, monkeys, crows, dogs, elephants, flowers, nature, and your altars. And I used to go to New Mexico a lot, and there were always these little altars everywhere. And so I would do that. I'd buy little things and come home and set up all these little altars all over my house. I still have some. And you would take photographs of your altars with little Hindu deities on them as like little stuffed animals sometimes. And it brought me so much joy and touched me on a level that, you know, I live here in the city, in a concrete building. And now I have a balcony, but I hadn't gone out much for 20 years, except these trips to New Mexico. So I would love seeing these. And like I told you, these photos are palpable. And the photos that you posted within the group in the P21 of this church next door to you, where you're staying in Sri Lanka, and do you use pastels when you do artwork and journaling? So I'm going to let you tell the listeners what these intensives are that you do, that they can sign up for.
Yeah, this is always, whenever I'm asked this is always the challenge, because there's so many layers. There's so many aspects.
It's hard to describe.
What you described was so beautiful, because I think that that's the magic of them, is what people experience. Like, I can tell you all the pieces, but this is a testament to how powerful a container is. When you create an alembic, or you create a temenos, over time, because now this is 14 years ago. I started in 2010, but officially 2011. Like 2010 was my experimental time doing it with people in the West Village in New York City. I was just telling Billy about that this morning on his podcast, or Substack, not podcast. And I thought, wow, yeah, so 14 years ago, we started an alembic. So there's like the grand alembic that's contained this work since that time, when it first started, when I was 40. And I said, wait, I want to see what happens if we set an intention. And I know there's magic in 40, because it's the number of the Venus retrograde. I know that if you invite the gods in, just like if you're in an analysis or you're in a retreat, when you make that kind of sacred time, magic happens, because you've created this sacred space. So it started as an experiment. What will happen over 40 days and 40 nights if we set an intention on an altar, or we just place a theme? Intention is a funny word with the unconscious, because as we know, the gods laugh while we have intentions, and they make up their own. They reveal what really the greater intention. So the first time we just basically said, God, show me whatever I need to see for the 40 days. Like, what do you want me to see? Like, what am I missing here, for 40 days and 40 nights? And the first one turned out to be my divorce. That's a whole nother story. They showed me something I didn't expect to see, which was time for a divorce. But we can laugh now. It was a blessing in disguise, because that was just, and I always share that, because a lot of times I think our turning point in our life's work, our real true calling, often hinges on these losses, these great losses, or these great betrayals, disappointments, death, all the above. So it was really born in this very intense time. There had been also a lot of other death in my life at that time. So I share that because I think, the origin, I'm very obsessed with origin stories of anything, and the origin story of why it's not just another 40-day program, or change your life in 40 days or in 21 days. It's, it was my way also of, I actually think I had a premonition that I started already noticing people weren't having the patience, the focus, the money to do analysis, like I was already stretching it with all my clients, trying to help them to do the deep inner work, and realizing like already back then, I mean, now it's forget it, but back then the attention spans were already waning, and people were already like, and I lived in New York City, where it's like, the heart of psychoanalysis too. It's another one of those cities that, everyone's in analysis. It's not like I was living in, trying to do it in some remote town or something. But even then, I noticed that the interest started waning in the commitment level of people really doing that deep Jungian work. It was kind of like, I saw the difference from when I started, and that was kind of the beginning of the end. So I thought, well, a lot of people, mainly people just couldn't afford it. Living in New York City, like who can really, especially artists that were attracted to me, and most of my clients were artists, like they could barely afford their rent. How are they going to afford analysis, So, but I wanted people to be able to do the deep work. So I thought there's got to be a way, we can do it as a group. And I was so pleased and amazed to see the depth of work that happened in that container, that it was even more intense than one-on-ones with people weekly. I was like, this is because you're working every day together and you've got the power of the group. You feel it. I mean, what you might be experiencing, since this is your first time, which is so wonderful to hear the feedback from someone who has been in analysis, who obviously, you speak the language, because people come that know nothing about Jung and just are like, this sounds interesting. And then they're like, whoa, what are we doing? So I think the beauty and the gift of having this alembic, like I said, that's been really nurtured and strengthened, and, so much love and energy has been put into it for the last 14 years. You have that, and then you have whoever comes in each time. You have the energy of the people that come together. And I was saying, I think especially having someone with such a powerful energy like Billy Corrigan, who's such a prolific artist, and he's also a very mythic kind of soul. Like he said when he first read Jung, it's like, oh, somebody speaks my language. I mean, his music, his writing, his sensibility is very Jungian. So it's been such a pleasure. I've been collaborating with him for the last several. This is the first time we're doing it on a daily basis, and I've actually brought him fully into the alembic. Normally he comes for a Q&A. Okay. So he's in it that way, but it's been different to connect with him daily on the themes, because I can really feel it's given me such a direct experience of how that invisible line of energy between people, like I was just telling him this today, it's like we can feel how, like whatever he's going through energetically, I can feel it because we're connecting, through that. But it's all of us. I mean, if I could connect to each person in the alembic, and I keep it to 40 people so that it's like a tight container. Okay. That I'm sure, and this is the magic, people say, wow, when you wrote this letter, it's like you're writing it to me. I'm like, actually, you're writing it through me is what's happening, because we're living it together in real time. So it does show that a causal synchronicity principle in action in such a tangible way. And that to me is really the magic.
And the participants can interact with each other as much or as little as they want. There's a WhatsApp group, a private group, and a Facebook group as well. And you can do it, not do it a lot, do it a little. And I have a very difficult time sharing personal things. And so I have shared a little bit. Like one day the topic was the mother, and I did post a photo of my mother when I was, I think, barely 2 years old. And there were a bunch of synchronicities, and I would send them to you. So you allow the participants to email you directly, or share with the group, or not share with the group. And that's the beauty of it. There's no pressure. And everybody understands, okay, you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's fine. Or you do. And we're there to support each other and witness each other. And I read the messages, and I hear you, and I see you. And that's so important.
Yeah. Being witnessed. The deeper I go into this work, and especially, now having authentic movement is such a focus in my work for the last 5 years, especially, the whole principle of witnessing and being witnessed, and how healing that is on so many levels. Even if it's, what's really fascinating is, even in this invisible internet realm, how much we can feel. People say even when you get a text message, you can often feel the energy behind that message when that person wrote it now. I think we're becoming so sensitive to that. So there is, because of course, with authentic movement, it used to be like we have to be in person, and it was so much about reading the bodies and the energy in the room. And I remember even when we first started doing these Skype or Zoom sessions, the first time I tried to do it with some of my clients, I thought, oh God, this is never going to work. This is terrible. This is not the same.
Yeah.
And now it is. Like, we've changed.
We've changed. Yes. This is all has changed us.
It's changed us, right? I mean, it's not exact. I still prefer in person for sure. But I'm amazed how it's pretty close.
Mm-hmm. So for the listeners who are not familiar with authentic movement, would you tell us what that is?
Sure. Yeah. So that, okay, well, I'll just give you first the kind of more straight version of it, and then I can tell you, okay. just like the Project 40.
Yeah.
Just like all Jungian things, it's kind of like, how do you pinpoint this? So what now I call authentic movement started off as something I used to call zodiac dance. Actually, it was first called Kali dance, then zodiac dance. And then I was like, oh, there's this thing called authentic movement that I'm doing. I didn't know that I was actually doing that. So Mary Stark's White House was the pioneer of that, which I didn't know about until I think I discovered this 5 years ago, because I didn't know I was doing authentic movement. So she's the one who, if you look up authentic movement, like pioneer, you'll see Mary Stark's White House. She was into Jungian psychology, of course. And so let me think, the easiest way to break it down. I mean, without doing like a full historical study on it, basically, what would be fascinating for your listeners is that it is really rooted in Jungian psychology. It is a form of active imagination. There are still a lot of practitioners who, even Marianne Woodman, she was considered, her work with the, what was it called? The Power of Three or something, where she would have the witness, the mover, and the person engaging the mover. That was a form of authentic movement that she incorporated into her workshops. There's Tina Stromstead now in California, and there was Janet Adler and Joan Chodorow. Those are kind of the main authentic movement people. So it's still pretty esoteric, not as well known. It's interesting. There's not a lot of writing on it, but what's out there is really fascinating, of finding that connection between the movement and the symbolic language of the unconscious.
So is it dance?
Oh, sorry. Let me just give you the actual description. It can be, but it's really about waiting for a movement. It's like allowing the body to express the unconscious. So now what's interesting is I kind of stumbled on that, which I found really fascinating, because I didn't know there was actually a tradition. And I, as a Jungian analyst, I wanted to, and I was also a dancer, I was always looking for ways to express the unconscious, which is, I'm sure, how everybody probably found authentic movement or some version of that. So with my clients, I thought, well, I know how much I love movement and how healing it is. And so in the beginning, I would just say, bring a song that you love, put it on, let's just see what happens. That was my instruction. Like, just see what happens, just total free form it. And let's see what happens. And then I was like, whoa, there's a shadow. Cool. And it wasn't, like I said, until recently that I found more of the subtle slowing down, which is our theme of the day, slowing down, the power of slowing down, and even doing it in silence, doing it without music. And I really feel actually my own specific journey with it really came through Mata Amatanandamayi, through my connection with her, because it was such a natural process that I just discovered in my work. I felt after I met her, in my attempt to bring the divine feminine into the work so that it wouldn't be so heady. I knew I wanted people to have another outlet of expression. And I knew that the power, that's why I called it Kali dance in the beginning, because I said, if only Kali could come and dance through these women, I know they're going to get to all the trauma and the rage and the shame and the guilt and the fears and get out of their head. And it worked. We would summon Kali and amazing things would happen. And then it became zodiac dance, because then I thought, well, let's bring the astrology in, because if we can map it, like if we can connect to what's happening, like for instance, like let's say right now, Mars is about to station direct after being retrograde. So if I was doing a zodiac dance workshop now, I'd be like, let's work on Mars. Like we all got to channel some Mars energy right now. Let's see what's happening with Mars in our bodies. So like that. And
our bodies. That's the key right there, what you said. What's happening with Mars in our bodies?
Exactly. Through the body, through the psyche. And otherwise those energies get pent up and they become symptomatic.
Yes. Yeah. So you mentioned astrology, and also I want to say you do give a really good description for this PT21 or your P40s in general. You say it is The Artist's Way, which is a book by Julia Cameron, who I used to know, and did The Artist's Way. It's kind of a cross between, or a combination of The Artist's Way, Jung's Red Book, and A Course in Miracles.
Yes.
That's a nice description, but it's yours. It's unique, and what you bring to it. And you have awakened in me, or reminded me, because you and I are similar age, similar references, grew up in the United States, and similar interests. And I forgot a lot of stuff. Like even on Instagram, you posted a photo of Madonna singing with her tambourine. She was singing Into the Groove. I knew every lyric, every dance move, and I hadn't thought of that in years. And it just made me remember things. And I always say, you bring me back into my body. And yeah, so I'm going to put a link to your Instagram account in the show notes. I highly encourage everyone to follow Sherene on Instagram, because it's palpable. And also in the P21, you don't just send us descriptions and words in the email. Sometimes you record your voice, and that's palpable too. And then the opening ceremony was this 2-hour, 20-minute talk. You took questions. Billy came on. It's just so rich and so, I have no words for it. So, and I didn't ask you, there's so many things I'm jumping around. I want to ask you about how you know Billy, and then I want to ask you to tell the listeners about the current astrology. So let's give a shout out to Billy and have you tell us a little bit about how you connected with him, because he is your collaborator on this particular intensive, this P21 Secrets.
Yeah. We're just like such kindred souls. We connected through astrology. He said he found my work somehow. I don't even know if he knows how. Like someone introduced him to my work, but he found it. And so we did our first reading one time when I was in India. I was in India, and I remember the first time we met, it was on screen. Okay. And I was like, what a sweet, humble guy. Like we had an instant connection. We just got each other. We speak the same language. So it was a pleasure reading for him. And then it just evolved into a friendship and collaboration since around the time, 2020, actually. The first collaboration we did was for what was called Aquarius Rising, when we were working on this, I guess what do you call it? Like when you get a bunch of speakers together. It wasn't it wasn't a symposium. I don't know. It was an online, let's all get together, and we wanted to raise money for COVID, basically. To help in India. And because that's actually, it happened, we did that actually 2021. It was when COVID was hitting India really hard. And he graciously agreed to do it. And we had I basically got all my favorite people together. And so that's how it started. And then I brought him on for another one, like for a Q&A for something. And he was, I was like, wow, like, it's like he's been doing these P40s. Like, we really just speak the same language. And he had so many insights, and he helped so many people through those Q&As. Like, he changed lives just in the advice he would give. He's like, he's a very wise soul.
Yeah.
And you probably saw even in that opening ceremony, he's just like a stream of,
yes,
you can see he's walked the talk. He's lived the shadow. He's done the work.
So important.
Yeah, he's just a wonderful, wonderful soul. And I'm so glad the gods brought us together. Before that, I feel like I always tell him this too. I think we were connected because I used to put on performances in New York City, the dancer side of me, but I would do them from a very Jungian lens, like very archetypal themes. And I often incorporated his music. So because I felt it was so archetypal, his songs. So he was already part of my psyche. So I think I conjured him into my life in 3D.
And for the listeners who aren't familiar with Billy, his band is called the Smashing Pumpkins. And did he do solo work as well?
Yeah, he's got a lot of solo
work. And right now he has a new YouTube show. It's not a podcast, it's a YouTube show. Or maybe it's not just on YouTube where he...
It is a podcast. Yeah.
It's a podcast. He filmed, it's video. And I just watched his interview with Sharon Osbourne. So interesting because he talked about her life and her father and her work, and he's great. The production is really beautiful. So there will be links to Billy's shows and his work and his music in the show notes. And so the other thing, Sherene, is the astrology of the day, which in this P21, I'm going to look at my notes here for this.
Sure.
You mention I always have so many notes. I don't know if I can find it. Yeah, here. So, no. Yeah. Okay. I don't have it. Yes. Here it is. Mars retrograde. So in the description for this intensive, you say real-time conversations and deep inner work are essential now as we navigate the numinous, treacherous, and miraculous landscape of 2025 due to the following. 1, Mars retrograde. 2, the year of the snake, the serpent of the depths. 3, Jupiter is stationing direct, so a planet usually moves forward. They'll station, which means come to basically a standstill. Retrograde is when they appear to be moving backward. They're not technically moving backward. They just appear from our vantage point here on Earth to be moving backward. Jupiter has been moving backward. Jupiter turned direct. The next is the upcoming monumental Saturn-Rahu-Neptune conjunction in Pisces on the new moon solar eclipse and Mercury retrograde all on the same day, and the upcoming Venus retrograde in Pisces. So, do you want to take on any of those?
Whew, yes, sure. Let's see. Well, I think what's dominant right now this week is the Mars station. So on Monday, Mars is going to station direct. And that means right now, between now and Monday, we're under that influence, you could say, of Mars. We're feeling the energy of Mars more acutely. It's wrapping up whatever deep underworld experience we've had with our inner archetype of Mars, meaning anger, aggression, courage, conflict, anger management, asserting yourself, competition. And ultimately what Mars is trying to have us do is to become very heroic, ultimately, and disciplined, actually. So depending on, now Mars is, I'll give you the Western, because I think most people probably follow Western astrology here. Mars has been moving between Cancer and Leo in Western astrology.
Yeah.
So it's going to be taking us back. So you could think actually back to November, because that's when the shadow started. So like mid-November was the shadow period. So think about what you've learned in terms of your your conflict management style. Like, how do you deal with conflict? How do you resolve conflict? What do you do when you feel triggered? Like, how do you process anger? You know, do you internalize it? Do you project it? You know, all of these themes have been coming up. So it's good to do a little bit of a retracing of your process, of your life, and key events maybe that have happened since, let's say, especially since December 7th. And now it's a little bit of the wrap up and the integration time, and we'll feel like we can finally slowly move forward. There's usually a lot of frustration around the time Mars is retrograde. Like, it feels like you're spinning your wheels or you're not able to get traction.
Yeah.
You have to be more careful of accidents. Like my mother, poor mom, she's an Aries rising, so she's really affected by Mars. And she just told me this morning, what happened? She burnt her forehead with a curling iron.
Oh.
Very Mars, like weird freak accidents like that. I know, she's okay, but like you have to watch out for those kind of things, or slips and falls, or, you know, just be extra mindful about your energy. So that's number one. Now, right on the heels of that, we have Venus doing the opposite thing. So Venus is about to go retrograde, and Venus retrograde is happening March 1st. So we're already in the shadow of the Venus retrograde. She just achieved her maximum brilliance, I think 3 days ago, which is always profound. And she's also exalted, at least in Vedic astrology. Sorry, I think I don't know where she is in Western. I'm going to give you the Vedic because I'm not sure. She might be in Aries already. But she's really strong, let's say. And, but she's getting ready for her descent. You know, it's the whole Inanna, you know, being stripped from the 7 gates descent that we're right on the verge of. So that's really interesting. So suddenly, like, Mars is coming full force because he's been very weak since November. Like, he's been really struggling, you know. So that's good or bad. It's kind of like, on the one hand, it's made the masculine energy a little bit more subdued. So that's about to like come full force, especially as you know, we get closer to June. That energy is really ramping up, that Mars energy. Now, whereas Venus, who's full power, beauty, brilliance right now, she's great. She's really protecting us. She's the saving grace right now. She is, I mean, as I've been saying, we have to really appreciate and soak up all that beautiful Venus energy, which is love, sweetness, connection, creativity, harmony, all of that. We have access to that right now. But when she starts retrograding, you know, that starts to diminish. And then when she becomes a morning star, she's considered more of like a goddess of war at that point, you know. So Venus is more fierce as the morning star. Right now, she's still, you might have seen in the sky in the last few nights, like gorgeous diamond sparkle, you know.
Yeah.
That's all about to change.
So Venus is actually in Aries right now in the Western tropical zodiac. She's in Aries, and Aries, the sign, is ruled by the planet Mars. So did I say Venus? Yeah. Venus is not comfortable in Aries because Aries is ruled by Mars. So let's just contrast that with this sidereal zodiac and Vedic astrology. So where is Venus now, according to Jyotish?
In Jyotish, she's in Pisces, her sign of exaltation. She's in a beautiful exchange with Jupiter, giving her even more brilliance. And she's at her highest, you know, point right now in terms of her cycle. I guess the way it would dovetail with the Western, you know, because people say, well, that's totally different, is that, you know, Mars is still dominating the scene. So when you kind of interpret like what's happening in the energy, even though Venus is so beautiful, because even as Western astrologers are going to say, wow, she's maximum brilliance right now. But she's got this kind of Mars thing happening if she's in Aries, right? So either way, Mars is making his presence felt, however you want to get there. Mars is trying to dominate the scene. Venus is like protecting us still, even if she's overshadowed by Mars at the moment. But it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, I mean, I guess, okay, so when she retrogrades, she'll be in Pisces in both systems, so that'll be easier. Because there is that crossover for a few degrees in the zodiac where they're the same, which I love. But let's just say that this upcoming journey, regardless of the sign, is about us getting stripped down. So we all have to sort of prepare for whatever our external Venus attachments are, like our vanity, our whatever it is externally that we haven't fully integrated or anchored ourselves internally.
Mm-hmm.
We always get this, once every 18-month initiation where we get stripped gate by gate. We go down, we get stripped, something gets taken away. It happens every time. So I always try to prepare my clients like, the way to bolster yourself during this is to find that inner beauty. You have to, because you might not feel as beautiful externally. Something could get stripped away from your life that you rely on to feel beautiful, that's on the outside or in the external world. And it's really a gift from Venus that we have that opportunity during the retrograde to do the deeper inner work, where we have to find what makes us feel beautiful, even if we're having 40 days of bad hair days, or whatever. We lose our title, we lose our relationship, we lose our money, whatever it is, that we use to feel secure or beautiful.
Because Venus also rules relationships and money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the astrology podcast, they look at celebrity relationships, and they always keep track of the celebrity breakups during Venus retrograde. As an example, to use as an example.
Yes.
And so what about this? It's very intriguing. This upcoming Saturn, Neptune, Rahu. Rahu is the north node of the moon. Mm-hmm. And they're going to move into Aries. I mean, for us, for the Western astrology, the Aries point, very, very, very powerful point. That is very intense. And would you just tell us a little bit about that? Because we can't ignore that. That's just
there's a huge confluence. I mean, this is an interesting way to kind of test the two symbolic systems, right?
Okay.
So in Vedic, I'll just give you the depiction. So March 29th, we're going to have this conglomeration. It's Saturn, Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, Rahu, who's always retrograde, and the Sun and
Neptune.
6. This is all in Pisces. In Vedic, all in Pisces, on that new moon solar eclipse in Pisces. So what I was saying about the serpent of the deeps, which to me is it is the most Jungian nakshatra of nakshatras. Nakshatras are the constellations behind the zodiac signs. Mm-hmm. In Vedic astrology, they're the stars, the star clusters. They're divided up. So basically, you would take one constellation and break it down into these different lunar mansions. We call them lunar mansions because it's the way they track the movement of the moon every month, mm-hmm. that he visits one of those mansions each day. So this particular part of Pisces, which also in Western astrology falls into the beginning of Aries, is what we call the serpent of the deeps. And it's so red book. It's just if you read the description, it's it looks like Jung's drawings of the snakes and the mm-hmm. everything coming up from the depths. So the point of that is to say that I'm certain this eclipse on March 29th, and it does coincide with what they're saying in the Western astrology, that it's like a total reset. I mean, it's like a total dissolution of the reality that we know now. And it's imperative that we go deep. I mean, to survive that level of transition, we've got to be anchored in our depths. We can't be floating up here on the superficial. Just like when a wave comes, you've got to go under, right? If you try to hover up here, you're going to get completely thrashed. Yeah. You have to go under and deep to survive, really. So you have to go to the core during this eclipse. So I think all of us have to go to that depth of our soul work to see where the anchor is for us during this cataclysmic, it's like a cyclone of change. I'm calling it cyclonic sea change. It's not a sea change, it's like a cyclone coming to our lives, or as we've known them. I mean, we can already feel that happening, right? Yeah. Not too hard to imagine. We're right on the verge of that, no?
Yeah. Yeah. So you are available for readings. Is that correct? For
Yes.
the listeners, should any of the listeners be interested in, excuse me, having you do an astrology reading on them, you are available through Zoom?
Yeah, I do my readings on Zoom, and I can definitely give you the link. People can book directly to my calendar because I am in a different time zone, so
Mm-hmm.
it has the conversion of the time zones there. And yeah, I mean, and in my readings, I really combine the my Jungian psychology background, and I do them in that way to try to support people. I mean, of course, I always end up making some predictions too, but I really love doing deep sessions with people to really help them get to exactly what we're talking about, like what in their soul is supporting and sustaining them during these changing times, and specifically looking at what their soul is asking of them at that time based on their karmas and where they are in their life story.
Soul work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes we forget that that's what it is. That's what it's about at that level,
Yeah.
right? So, what else do we have to discuss today? I'm going to bring up my notes. Do you think that we covered enough what's in the P21? I mean, it's a sacred space, so I didn't want to reveal too much of what we're doing. I certainly don't want to share anybody else's experience. I could share mine. I don't know if we want to keep that private, or
No,
what
no,
do
I
you
mean
think?
that's okay. Especially if you're sharing yours, if it's comfortable for you. I think the best way to understand what happens is through an individual experience because it is so unique and individual. I mean, I think what's collective about it is that we are going through the same um, we're obviously all navigating the same collective themes right now, which our uncertainty, our secrets, like we don't know what is being withheld from us. And so the beauty of Jungian work is to say, okay, well, then let's do the inner version of that, right? Because that's what's being called on us.
Sorry for all the clicking. I was
No
what
problem.
I should have said this before. So I'm in front of this window, and we started at 5:30 a.m. Chicago time. The sun wasn't up yet,
So
and
beautiful.
you could see the moon behind me earlier over here,
Yeah.
and the sun is now up. It's 6:47 a.m. and the sun is up, and I wanted to try this because I wanted a live background instead of a
Oh,
soundproof wall. But just really quickly, we are on day 7, or are we on day 8, Sherene?
today's day 8.
Today
We
is
just
day
started day
8.
8. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got up at 3:30 a.m., which I love doing. I love that. It's so quiet.
It's so magical at that hour. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the holy hour.
Yeah, and so I haven't done today's work yet, but just for the listeners to give them a little bit of a taste of what we've done. Day 1 was entering the creative unconscious, and I think that that was such a great starting point. Day 2, sabotage. Day 3, the mother. Day 4, the underworld. No, day 4, the star.
Yeah.
And I had a huge synchronicity around that.
Ooh.
And day 5 was the underworld. Um, Day 6, heartbreak, which was very difficult for me to think about that.
Mm.
And would you just tell us a little bit about why? And day 7, faith crisis. So let's just talk a little bit about, and we've gone over an hour, which I don't typically like to go too much over an hour. So we'll just do a little bit here. Um, I don't know what I wanted to ask you about heartbreak. Why?
Mm.
I thought when I saw that, I was disappointed. I thought, why do we need to revisit this? So maybe I can ask you, why do we revisit that? Why? That was hard.
Oh, yeah, that's why. That's why.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we would ask why is why. Because
Mm.
because there's something about heartbreak that's never fully healed.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that's why we have Venus retrogrades or we have any
Mm.
planetary retrogrades And it's interesting that the nodes are always retrograding because it's showing us that we're always being asked from the divine to go back over, to repeat in order to heal, in order to become more conscious, that we need a lot of repetition.
Yes. Yes,
And
that's reminding me. I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you because that's reminding me of my analysis is we keep doing the same things over and over and over again. And I would ask my analyst that why. And she'd say, yeah, we ask, is this the same brick wall? And yeah, so go ahead.
yeah, exactly. So it's just like the cycles repeat every year, right? Nature repeats. We see there's a reason we at each time we go through another cycle. You know, we are circumambulating the self, right? So we need these repeats, we need these cycles. Each time we come to it with hopefully more awareness and depth and maturity so that we can go even a little more into the subtle teachings of what that rupture was for us, or that fracture, or that break, or that wounding. Each time we revisit it, hopefully, because of I do feel, whether we're talking about individuation of the spiritual path, that it is about becoming more and more subtle. And the more and more subtle we become through repeating, we have that much more access to the subtle teachings of what that experience was trying to bring for us. And when we get that at the most subtle level, you know, subtle body level, let's say, then we're free of it. Then I think that's the real gold. To me, that's the real alchemical gold, because it's that meeting point. It's like when you get to that level, that's where you have compassion and you have that direct empathy with another person, because you know it on such a deep, profound level. And before that, maybe there's resistance, maybe there's judgment still, maybe there's shame still, maybe there's other emotions that keep you from having your heart fully. That's why heartbreak, I think it does rip the heart open in order to embrace more of the compassion for otherness. I just read the most beautiful teaching from Amma last night before bed. Wow. This is profound and deep. She gives these very deep teachings that seem at first glance very simple, but they're like so deep. She said, you know, the reason a lot of people are self-conscious when they get up to sing a song or deliver a speech, let's say, is because of this sense of otherness. Like they see everyone outside of themselves as other. So it makes them self-conscious, makes us self-conscious. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. The more we go into this subtlety of who we are, and we go into our own pain, we won't see anything as other, because we'll say, wow, then you can see everyone as something you've been through, and some aspect of you.
Yeah, and I was also thinking about complexes and how we heal complexes is we have to go into the complex and then come out of the complex and then go back in and come out and go back in and come out. And hopefully every time we go in, we won't spiral down as far as we had prior.
You're right.
Yeah, complexes.
And I think the planetary transits and the repeat transits that you see in someone's horoscope will show you how the planets come to help you resolve the complexes. And sometimes complexes don't get resolved until that particular planetary alignment happens, and you're like, because we would say in Jyotish terms, the karma is finished.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I always hesitate to say things like that, because then I get attacked with people say, oh, so you think the planets cause things?
No.
Say
Don't
more.
cause. They don't cause. They're just a mirror. They're a reflection, and there's a timing. There's a divine timing.
Yes.
So they're coming for our support. They're never causing. They're like a map we read. They don't cause. They're like, it's again synchronicity. It's acausal, right? It's just a map. It's like it's happening at the same time, but it's not because it's causing. It's I mean, I guess the fine line with that is that obviously there's a grip. There's what we call in Vedic astrology, like a graha. Planet's called a graha, meaning it's grabbing you. So it's not that the planets are just la la up there. I mean, we see the moon affects the tides, but you could say the divine created that resonance between the two, right? So would you say that? So yes, the moon is affecting the tide, but ultimately, would you say the moon is what is responsible for the tide? No, the tide is the tide, right? It's just that's this confluence that's happening between them at that particular time. They both have their inherent natures, but the way they're syncing up, yeah, that's what happens. It's an alchemy, right? So who would you blame? I mean, that's why people say, "Oh, are you going to blame the planet?" No, it's an alchemy, and it's there for our consciousness. We should be praising it, and we should be, reverent toward that confluence, toward that alchemy that's happening between the as above so below.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I just want to say a little bit about day 7, which was yesterday. The topic is faith crisis, and as I was going through the readings, what you sent, I was thinking a crisis in faith, as far as I was thinking it was about religious faith. And I kept thinking, why is that word faith used? It always made me uncomfortable. Faith.
Mhm.
I'm a man of faith. I'm a woman, a person of faith. What the hell are you talking about? So as I was going through what the other participants, their experiences, I was realizing this could be faith in anything. This
Yeah.
didn't have to be religious faith. Faith in whatever. And so it brought this whole other layer of what? It opened up me considering, what is it that I've lost faith in? Parts of myself, my family, my community, my government, what? My beliefs, faith in what? So it just, these are all things that I haven't thought about in a long time. And it's made me consider something that a phrase that I keep going back to is all logos, no eros. So you've brought eros back.
Aw.
Yeah. And I want to thank you for that. And we're only on day 8, and we still have 2 more weeks to go. So I'm really looking forward to continuing this with you. And do you have future, since this is already, nobody can sign up, we're already underway, do you have future P40s or even P21s planned?
Yes. I mean, they're always born in real time. That's also the magic of them. So I don't plan them too far in advance, because when I've
Okay.
tried to do that, they always
Sure.
change. But what is already coming on the scene, I can feel, is to do the next one will be for this Venus retrograde. I always do
Okay.
something for Venus retrograde. I'm probably going to do a 9-day intensive
Oh,
between
nice.
eclipses, because I've done that in the past. It's a really good way to bridge the eclipse energies that are coming up for everyone, because those stir up such deep themes in our psyche, in our dreams, and in our lives. They're such, they're huge catalysts for monumental life changes. So
Yeah.
I think it's good to have an alembic or a container during that time. So I'm thinking to start one between those 2 eclipses, between March 14th and March 29th.
Between March 14th and March 29th. Okay. And there will be links to Sherene's upcoming intensives on speakingofjung.com's website. You can also follow her on Instagram, and then you have a newsletter too, right?
Yeah, a Substack. I started a new
That's
Substack.
right, your Substack.
Or you can sign up for my newsletter. My newsletter on my website is, you're going to get more, like, that's where you'll get really, real-time updates for projects I'm doing and stuff.
Okay.
You'll get it on both, but Substack is more of, you just, if you want to follow my writing, I'm devoting more of like my writing and, making that a little more artistic.
Yeah,
I mean,
those have become popular.
Themes. Yeah, I really enjoy that. Like more like a blog style or something, right?
So
Yeah.
we're coming up on the close here, and I always would like to ask my guests if there's anything that we haven't covered that you would like to mention. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If there was anything else that you'd like to mention before I read the outro.
You know what I heard? I was like, oh, you're turning it over to the people listening in my head.
Oh.
That's what I was hearing.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Gosh, let's see. I feel like we covered so many great things. I mean, I could talk to you forever. It's so much fun. I can't think of anything specific that we've missed. I hope we have, so we can do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. And again, for the listeners, there will be links to everything Sherene spoke about in the show notes for this episode, in the YouTube description. Also in the YouTube description, I have a link to the website and the show notes. So Sherene, I am going to remove you from the screen. I'm going to read the outro, and then I'll bring you back so we could say goodbye.
Okay, love. Sounds great. I was looking for light. Okay.
Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for your time. Thank you for sharing all this with all of us. And I just love you. So wonderful. Okay, I'm going to remove you, Sherene, and then I'll be back.
Okay.
Okay, here is the outro. What do we have? Speaking of Jung is not just a podcast, it is also a website. Please visit speakingofjung.com, where you will find extensive information on the life and work of C.G. Jung, show notes, and audio downloads for all of our 150 some episodes, 58, 59, a comprehensive books page, a blog, and now a monthly email newsletter, which you can sign up for at the bottom of our front page. All of our episodes are also available on YouTube podcasts, which you can access by subscribing to this channel, Jungian Laura. It's free. Just click the subscribe button below. I created Speaking of Jung almost 10 years ago. This year is our 10th anniversary. And all of our content is still free to access, but it is not free to produce. So please consider contributing to our tip jar on Patreon for just $5 a month, or visit our support page at speakingofjung.com/support for links on all the ways you can help keep this podcast and our website alive. So with very special thanks to all of our Patreon members, I am Laura London, and you've been watching The Secrets of Speaking of Jung.